Hello, I'm Taslima from Bangladesh. I'm an activist and photographer. I'm in stream.
Hi, I'm Femi OK.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today, we're diving into a story that you, our community, pitched.
Now, during our recent open editorial, Joe Bungley asked us to look into the struggles of India's tea workers. He'll be joining us today in the stream. India is the world's second largest tea producer, and for many of the 1.2 million tea pickers driving this cash crop, it means a life of pain and suffering.
Workers are routinely subjected to harsh living conditions, food insecurity, and low wages. That's according to the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition. The problems stem from the legacy of a feudal plantation system. Many workers are descendants of tribal communities forced into labor during India's colonial period. To this day, workers don't own the land they toil, and each family is required to provide a picker to continue living in the tea gardens.
So how can bee workers be protected, and what can you do to be a responsible consumer? So joining us to talk about this via Skype in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Upendra Pradhan. He's an activist and Darjeeling native who pitched the show under the Twitter handle Joe Bungley. In Providence, Rhode Island, Sarah Besky. She's an anthropology professor at Brown University and author of the Darjeeling Distinction, that's Labour and Justice on Fair Trade Tea Plantations in India. In Calcutta, Anudra Tawa. She's the West Bengal advisor to the Commissioner of the Supreme Court on Right to Food. And in Darjeeling, Rajiv Lochan. He's the owner of the Lochan Tea Company. Welcome, everybody. Let me just show you something here on my laptop. Let's take this cup of tea here. Out of all of where the profits go, 53% of the profits would go to your retailer for your cup of tea. And then right down here, 0.16% would go to the actual tea picker. Upendra, is this the biggest challenge here with workers who work on tea gardens, is they get such a tiny amount in wages, and yet the end of that chain, the supermarket, gets most of the profits?
Yeah, well, to begin with, I think it's not just the wages. It's also the treatment of workers like they are, not human enough. I think that's the main problem. And the problem is not just with the retailers getting most margin. The problem is also with the government not treating the workers right. So I think when I looked at that chart, I felt that, that was an accurate portrayal of where the tea garden workers are at today, at the lowest rung of the whole system.
So the lowest rung of the whole system, what does that mean that the conditions are like? Rajiv, you've got a tea garden. What are conditions like for your average tea garden in India?
I will admit that the conditions are not good at all. It's very unfortunate that we did not do anything to improve the lives of the people who were real important asset to this industry, that's tea workers. Mm. What we adapted immediately after the independence was to have a very, very cheap providing model. We were providing cheap teas to the world scenario. Mm-hmm. We are about 25% of the world total production. And instead of making very high quality teas, we opted for very cheap teas, and then we wanted to sell them cheaper and cheaper. And for that, we developed a tea auction system. And the tea auction system, because of getting too much tea at a time, brought it down, and that resulted into a very serious situation today, that the wages are very low and that the conditions are subhuman. There is a very bad sharing of the profit with the workers, who should have been number one today. After independence, we should have taken care of them. We have failed in our mission. We have failed in our responsibilities towards the table. I'm so sorry in telling that and admitting it also.
You're not the only one who is sorry about that. I want to share a few stories that people shared with us. This is Shailendra, who says Darjeeling tea workers don't get fair distribution for their labor and their sweat. Management often takes it all away. We also got a video comment from someone who has experience with this because his family worked in the tea gardens. This is Dipendra, and this is what he told the stream.
Earlier, my mother used to work in the tea garden as tea worker. After she passed away, my father replaced her and worked there as tea laborer till the last few years. But with no certainty about the wages, about incentives, or with no any kind of financial security, he has to quit his job. In my case, me and my brother, we had some other options for earning, so our family surviving. But many other, my neighbors or my father's co-workers, they don't have such kind of options.
So Anuradha, he says no financial security. Should there be a minimum wage that tea workers and tea pickers actually earn?
Yes, there should be. And the thing is that it's a very strange situation. Tea workers, there's something called the Minimum Wage Act in India, and there's a schedule of employments there under which all the workers that are put into that schedule are supposed to be paid minimum wages. Tea workers are on that schedule, but there is no minimum wage declared for them. What happens is that they are given a wage according to a collective bargaining agreement. So there's an agreement between workers, trade unions and government every 3 years. And it's a kind of a pittance wage that is given to these people. It's much below the minimum wage declared in any other industry, in any other profession. It's below wages that are there around even in other sectors in the same area. For example, if you would go to an agricultural field right next to a tea garden, people are paid more there than they are paid on the tea garden. So it's a very sorry kind of a situation. And I wouldn't agree with Rajiv. Rajiv was making it sound as if that we were exporting cheap tea and therefore we were not being able to pay wages to our workers. Actually, what has been happening is that we are not exporting. We are primarily dependent on the domestic market. Only 17% of our tea is exported, and our domestic market is an expanding market, and prices of tea in the market have also been rising. There's no real reason why workers should not be getting better wages. The picture that you showed, the chart that you showed in the beginning of the distribution of wages was for the export market. But within the domestic market, there is also money where tea workers could get paid much better. There's a whole, there's a lack of desire to pay them. There's this total, sort of desire to exploit workers, which is there amongst the management, which I think is responsible for the situation there.
Rajiv?
I would just barge in. I would just barge in, and I did not talk about the export at this moment, What I was just saying that we have not been able to get the right prices for our produce, or rather we have not been able to market our produce at that price, level where we could pay right wages to the workers. Whether we export, whether we sell locally, we consume, we ultimately use it, and we must realize very high prices for that to give the right wages to the workers. We have not been able to do that. And I said that the auction system was responsible for this lower prices. That's what I said.
Can I barge in? Can I just quickly?
I'd like to say something after you.
Yeah, Upendra, go ahead.
Yeah, well, what Rajiv says, it's, he's still talking about 1900s. This is 2016, and the tea garden owners are not just selling tea via auction. They are selling by themselves. They're selling directly to foreign buyers. They're exporting tea right from their tea gardens. They're selling online. If you go online right now, Google Darjeeling tea, you'll find the top, 50 will be tea gardens with their sites selling tea at world prices, and they are not selling in rupees. You'll find it in pounds, in dollars, in euro. So, Mr. Rajiv, I think, you're correct in saying that tea prices have been low in the past, but that is totally not the case today. I don't think it would be true today. Thank
So,
you.
Sarah, what I want to be quite
Upendra, you were
explicit.
talking
So
about 1%.
Guess, just hold tight for a moment.
Upendra, you're just...
Hold tight for a moment, because I want to be explicit about something. We're talking about the low wages of the workers. I want to draw that connection between what does that actually mean for their lives. Sarah, you looked into that, and I don't think we should finish this show or go on beyond anymore without actually explaining what does this mean for their lives.
So, I mean, wages are not kind of maybe how you may think of wages. Wages, as Anuradha pointed out, are remarkably lower than minimum wages in other industries. That's certainly the case. The reason why that's the case is because workers are said to make up the rest of that cash payment in kind. So workers get housing, or supposed to get, according to the Plantations Labor Act of 1951. Supposed to get. No, that's really the operative word. Supposed to get housing, food rations, medical facilities. If that house, you know, something happened to the roof, for example, that roof is supposed to get repaired. And all of that in-kind benefit is factored in to the wage. And so therefore the cash payment that workers receive, all workers across India receive, in Kerala there's a little bit of a different case, is much lower than other industries because they're said to make up the rest in kind. So, you know, as Anuradha pointed out, so the state of West Bengal has a wage for plantation workers. So that includes, you know, in West Bengal includes some of the cheapest tea, to use that word that's been, you know, that people have used, the cheapest tea that the country is producing, say in the Tours, and some of the most expensive tea that the country is producing in
Yet
Darjeeling.
the wages are the same.
Yet the wages are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that despite the fact that, you know, in a way, it's regardless of the price that tea is selling. What we see in the case of West Bengal, that workers are making on these plantations the exact same wage. And so, I mean, and as you know, as all the speakers have also pointed out, there's a bifurcation in the market for Indian tea, a pretty radical bifurcation between tea that is exported and tea that stays in the country. The domestic market is huge.
So then, Sarah, what you're saying, what that translates to for tea workers is elucidated in this video comment we got from Ashutosh. And Ashutosh is a documentary filmmaker. He's been working on a documentary for the past year about tea gardens. He's also the photographer behind the photos that you see in our studio behind Femi and I. He's the one behind those. He sent us this video comment about conditions on tea gardens. Have a listen.
Closed tea gardens are the worst hit. Even if the workers in these closed tea gardens manage to survive starvation and malnutrition, they have other problems lined up, like human trafficking, drug abuse, alcoholism, and etc. etc. I must say, because of the increasing unemployment in these closed tea gardens, the human trafficking rate is higher than other areas. It is quite ironic that the people who are producing the world best tea like Tetley, Goodrich, Twinings are facing such a crisis. Thank you.
Now he's talking about closed tea gardens, and Upendra, as the video comment was playing, you were nodding your head. Can you relate to what he was saying about some of those conditions?
Well, see, to say those conditions are human would be wrong. Like, not just in the closed tea gardens, you'll be surprised and shocked if you go to a working garden and look at how the workers are having to survive. You know, it's the conditions are abysmal and inhuman. And I think there is a general tendency amongst our lawmakers which is allowing this to happen. If you look at what our state government has said, the Chief Minister, Mamata Banerjee, said there is no starvation death in the tea garden. She refused to acknowledge that there was, you know, starvation death in the tea gardens, which means that her government is not going to do anything to rectify the situation. The first, you know, step towards rectifying the situation is acknowledging, like, you have a problem. If the government is unwilling to say we have a problem, do you think they would bother about rectifying the situation? They wouldn't. Because the government has this hands-off attitude towards the problems of the tea garden workers, the industry feels they can do anything and get away with it, and that is exactly what they have been doing. They are doing whatever they want to, and there's nobody to hold them accountable, and that is where the main problem lies.
I thought it was really important in this conversation to hear the voices of tea workers as well as people talking about them. Have a look here on my laptop. I want to show you this gentleman here. And he's talking about unity, how if the tea workers get together, they ask for land rights as part of their deal, and also start organising. This may be a way out of the situation right now where they're not well paid. I'm just wondering, Rajiv, is that something that's a pragmatic way of going forward? I know you already acknowledged that the conditions are bad for tea workers in India. What about unionising? Would that help, do you think?
No. You see, a tea garden is a unit which is utilizing the maximum area for the tea plantation, and the balance which is not used for the tea plantation which is not fit for tea plantation, or having the factory or the bungalows or the labor lines or the rivers or something. So just giving the title to the land to the labor is not the answer at all. The only answer is to get the good price for the tea. Whether this is Darjeeling, which is just maybe 1% of the total production of it, or the CTC, which is 95% of our total production.
That's not correct. That's not correct. I mean, Said has already given you an example of Darjeeling teas, which are the most expensive teas, and of the Duar's teas, which are the cheapest teas in India, and yet the wage rates in both places are the same. So it's not a case of getting more money for the tea. That is not the problem. The problem is of basically enforcing labor law, of allowing workers to get their rights. And I think it's a totally unionized industry. So I think it reflects very poorly on the unions also. The situation there reflects very poorly on the unions. But what it also does is it shows basically that workers are in a state of bondage there. And one of the main reasons for the bondage is that they do not own their houses. They've been living there for 150, 200 years, but their families don't own that land. They're totally at the mercy of the employer, and the employer is able to chuck them out of their houses if they don't work on the plantation. So every family, even despite the very poor wages, will have at least one member working on the plantation. And even at the low wages, because they're afraid of losing their houses there.
Sarah, go ahead.
It's a state of bondage.
And Dipendra's comment pointed that out in a really detailed way, right? The job had to pass between kin members such that that family could continue to stay living on the plantation that Dipendra's family was living on, right? So if a worker retires, that job and the house are linked. So remember, wages are kept artificially low because of the provision of houses. You can't have a job without a house and a house without a job for permanent workers. So that to me is so key to the bondage that workers face on tea plantations in India, is that their entire domestic life is grounded in the capital in a for-profit business, right? The success of that for-profit business.
Sarah, I hear you there. And so then the question online is, well, what to do about that? We got this tweet from Rangbuli, who says, where are the people who can actually make a change? At least the Tea Board of India rep should be on this show. So note to everyone who's watching, we reached out to the Tea Board of India and they failed to respond to our request to come on the show to discuss this. But here's a suggestion from someone else on Twitter who says this is what should be done. Shailendra says, Darjeeling tea farms often close down and the owners flee when it's time to pay the workers. Those are those closed gardens we talked about earlier. He says what needs to happen is heavily penalizing them and de-recognizing the owners who flee after arbitrarily closing Darjeeling tea gardens and other gardens in India. Rajiv, do you think that is something you could ever see happening?
You see, it has happened in the case of certain gardens like Dawai Pani, and then it was for some time in the Okai tea, sometime in so many other gardens, but that's not the solution. The solution is not, again and again I'm telling, in penalizing the owners or anybody. The only solution is in realizing a good price for the produce.
So Rajiv, you keep going back to a business solution. It's like we have to be better at selling tea before we better at looking after the workers. I'm wondering whether if you're better at looking after the workers, it might help you sell tea. Let me show you something here. Again, this is a tea worker who is talking about her situation. Have a listen to her chatting here. And what she's saying is that for 3 months, she hasn't received rations. So rather than getting a full wage, she gets rations, or supposed to get rations. So there's rice and there's wheat flour and there's some sugar, all of that she hasn't had for 3 months. So I am wondering, Sarah, you're watching this show and you're thinking, I had no idea this was going on about all this was going on behind the production of the tea that I like to buy. Is there a way that you can think as a consumer, where's the ethical tea? Does that product actually exist?
Can I can I just say?
Go for it.
Sarah, you go first. You go first, Sarah. You go first.
I mean, I think the fundamental question is, like, these are 21st century plantations, and can there ever be kind of ethical tea produced on 21st century plantations? So often, right, in retail markets, whether it's fair trade or like kind of on the box of your favorite, brand of tea, right, the plantation is transformed semantically, right, through words, through discourse, into large farms, into estates, into gardens. These are plantations, and these are plantations that, that at least, again, sitting here in Providence, Rhode Island, that we think are part of a bygone system of production, but they're not. Like, they're very much with us, and workers are, bonded in this system of production, and we need to kind of think about what structural change would need to happen in order for that to change.
Yeah. Can I just intervene there? Can I say something there? There have been many examples of owners abandoning gardens and of running away with workers' dues. The latest example is of a company called Duncan's, which was one of the best tea companies in the Duars. So they owe something like 40 crores, which is like something like $6 million to their workers, and they've run away with that in 7 gardens. Now, the workers of these 7 gardens, where the garden was closed for the last 2 years, these workers have been trying to organize themselves and have tried to do plucking by themselves and to run the garden by themselves. Now, this is an effort which the government should support. This is something that all of us should support. In Tripura, which is another state of India, this has been done very successfully. Workers' cooperatives have been supported by the government. They've worked very well. And they have also prevented, they've acted as a kind of a signal to other owners, to rogue employers, against their running away. It's acted as a safeguard there. So this is something, cooperatives, which the workers can run themselves, and where employers are rogue employees, where they're not functioning properly, this is something that the government should look at very strongly and should support.
That's key. And that's key is government agreement in the case of Tripura to turn plantations into cooperatives. Because what we're seeing in the Doors is the expansion of regional monocultures, the growth of smallholders, supported by the Tea Board of India, which actually is there's producing like so much tea in the Doors now, for example, that it's not really allowing these plantations to be particularly viable enterprises to be run as plantations.
But Sarah, those who are watching this show, the question then is, what can they and we, because I love tea, what can we do? So this is Simran. She has a suggestion. She says consumers should not boycott tea. Instead, they should reach out to investors and call for ethical labor practices. She links us to this site here, accountability.org, with lots of different suggestions for what consumers can do. Upendra, we have just about a minute. What would you tell consumers they should do?
First is question the retailers and ask them if they know the conditions in the gardens from where they outsource their tea. The second thing would be to put pressure on the retail chain, like somebody in Winnipeg did recently. They took out petitions and got people to file them in, send it to all the retailers around Winnipeg, and told them make sure that you're buying your tea from the gardens that do actually provide facilities to the workers. But the sad part is the workers do not get the facility. Even the fair trade tea, or the so-called fair trade tea, is not fair at all, and that is where the problem actually lies. I just want to add one quick question.
Upendra, that question will be in our post show, because we're right at the end of this show. but we will keep everybody. It will be the teaser into what was Upendra going to say. You will not know unless you go online. Stream.aljazeera.com. That is a cliffhanger if I ever heard one. Thank you so much, guests, for being with us for our TV show. We're holding on to you to take you online to our post show, and hopefully we'll have more conversation there. Hashtag AJ Stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Upendra, what's your question? Welcome back.
Okay.
Post show. Here we go.
Thank you very much. So, I just wanted to begin by saying, just highlighting the government apathy towards the tea garden workers. Right now, there is a member of parliament of the upper house of Indian Parliament, Rajya Sabha, KD Singh, who is from the party, the political party that actually runs the state of West Bengal. So KD Singh, the member of parliament for Trinamool Congress that runs West Bengal, owns 3 gardens in Darjeeling Hills under the brand name of Alchemist Group. His company hasn't paid workers proper wages, bonuses, ration facilities since October of 2015.
So, Upendra, I'm just going to say that I can't verify that right now, so you're just saying that. I would like to revisit your question, which you said you had. Go ahead. What was the question?
Sorry, I'm lost at word for now. Maybe I'll come back to that later.
All right, okay. Because I don't feel that we can just call out people without having some kind of verification, them having us reaching out to them. But one of the things that I'm thinking that is quite tricky here is, Sarah, when we were asking what can we do as a consumer, it was very difficult. It was really difficult to make those choices. Right now, where would you go as a consumer?
Maybe first step is kind of maybe thinking critically about hubris is a strong word. Hubris in the question, like, what can I do? What can I do? How I spend my money can enact change in the world? And maybe kind of troubling that a little bit and thinking that it's not maybe about kind of a neoliberal, some sort of like market-based solution that buying can enact good in the world, that maybe that's often the case. Oftentimes I give talks and I'm asked this question all the time, the what can we do question. And honestly, the most radical kind of thing that could perhaps happen right now, that could happen in the Darjeeling tea industry or many tea industries, is if the Plantations Labor Act was actually followed. And to the letter, in all of the, food rations were mentioned on the program. Housing was maintained and fixed and built 8% new every year. All of these things are supposed to be provided. What I would like to see is more radical transformation, which we're seeing in the case, over the last few years, that even though plantations are closing, we can't kind of convert these plantations into cooperatives. We can't grant land rights to existing, to the workers on the plantations.
But Sarah, if I may add to your point, I feel the 1951 Plantation Labor Act itself needs to be overhauled. That's where I would start, because this Plantation Labor Act, which covers all the plantations across India, not just tea, coffee, rubber. This was developed by the British to protect British colonial interests. And this is 2016.
It was not done by the British. It was done post-British.
That's the thing.
It was done in independent India.
Yeah.
It was an act that came out of workers' struggles in independent India.
Yeah, if you look at who the prime actors
the Tea Plantation Act is 1951. All right, let me just move things on a little bit, because I know Malika wants to get back into the conversation. Malika, go ahead.
Well, we heard earlier some criticism of just using fair trade as the marker of where consumers can and should buy tea. I just wanted to bring this tweet up from Francesca, because she echoes what you said earlier, Sarah, and what you said, Anuradha. She says workers from rainforest and fair trade certified gardens are also exploited. Certifications not reliable, so we need to enforce local laws. There is a suggestion from someone else, though, on what to do. This is the Tea Emporium, so their handle gives you a little bit of an insight into where they're coming from. When consumers stop looking for the cheapest tea, we'll find the beginning of the solution. Anuradha, do you think that is one possible answer?
Well, I would say that people are not just consumers; they're also citizens. And it's very necessary that citizens from one country support the struggles of citizens from another country. That is another role that all of us can play. So if people are trying to establish a cooperative, if they're trying to get labor laws implemented properly, those are real and very hard struggles. So it's necessary that people who are in a more comfortable position should support these struggles. That is another role that we can play. We just don't have to be, people just who are consumers and who can control the world through what we consume. I think that's, Sarah's also said that. That I think is not a very good idea. I think it's much better if we can act as citizens and if we can support people's struggles to set up their own cooperatives, to get labor laws implemented, to organize against exploitation, to organize for better wages. This is something that we should support.
We haven't deliberately excluded Rajiv from the conversation. Unfortunately, we lost him at the end of the main show. But what I could hear was there was a distinct disconnect between you, Sarah, Anudra, Upendra, and the person who actually owns the tea garden. And actually, Rajiv, I was just talking about you. Are you back? Hello?
Yes.
He's not there. Hopefully we can get him back. Yeah, Rajiv, great. I was saying that there was a big difference between how you saw the challenges and how the rest of the guests saw the challenges. How do you bridge that gap?
I'll just simply say that, like Upendra is seeing only Darjeeling, and he talks about that the government is the only person responsible for this thing. Like I'm talking about Anuradha Talwar, she's talking from the point of view of the trade unions. Even if you name the whole garden title to the labor, the solution is not there. Even if you hold the government responsible, the solution is not there. The solution is to produce good teas. We have to innovate. 60 years after the independence, we did not, when we got the ownership of the plantations from the British, we did not innovate. We did not do the plowback into the production systems or the new bushes. That's
Rajiv, as you're speaking, everybody's sighing. No one's happy with what you're saying.
Producers are responsible for this thing. That they should have innovated. They should have made good qualities.
So Rajiv, that's the disconnect. You're thinking pure business, and they're thinking human rights and workers' rights.
Go for it. Prices and pay to the labor. That's the only. Cannot do anything.
Let me hear more from Rajiv because he disappeared for a big chunk of the time. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Brother Talwar was very right that there are certain raw producers. I agree. The laborers which are in the gardens, which are near to the towns, they are running away from that low wages, and then they are getting good wages into the cities, and then we have got the dearth of labor. There are a lot of government schemes which are there on the plantation, which get very good wages to the labor. But in that case, what happens that there is a lack of production or the lack of productivity, and then we again.
Rajiv, stop talking. See what happens when you stop talking.
There are a lot of problems at the moment.
Take a pause for a moment. Let's see what happens when you take a pause.
Try to find the solution, not blame each other.
All right. See, nobody is blaming the tea owners alone, which is why I said the government needs to do. I just saw a tweet on the scroll. Rangbuli said that whatever we talk is just jargon. Nothing is gonna change. And she said that politics is where the change needs to come from. See, till today, despite so many tea garden owners abandoning the garden, the latest one wasn't the Duncans. Yesterday, as we speak, like 12 hours ago, 2 tea gardens in Doers got shut down by the management. The management just put up a notice saying, we're shutting down from today, and they left. Kalchini. It's a huge garden, about 3,200 workers' life in peril right now, right? Till today, there is no recorded history in the tea industry of Darjeeling or Doers where a tea garden owner has been brought to book, has been prosecuted against for abandoning the garden. And that is where the trouble lies. Because if you look at the Plantation Labor Act of 1951, there is no provision for prosecuting the owners who abandon the garden. That's why I insist that the law must be changed, because these are outdated laws. And unless and until the law specifically says that these are the punishment you're going to get if you abandon the garden, the
my fear is if the law gets rewritten, if the PLA gets rewritten, it'll be written for the worse. And because I mean the people who are also calling for the rewriting of the PLA are the plantation owners themselves, and they want to see all of the quote unquote social costs removed from the PLA. And so
yes.
like my fear with, rewriting the PLA is that it'll actually end up making workers a lot more insecure than they already
But
are.
that
And
is
I mean,
that is where people like you and Anuradha and Rajiv and myself and others who want to protect the workers come in. That is where we have to voice what kind of new PLA is written. Because
Upendra,
if we allow
Sarah,
this system,
Anudra, Rajiv, I like the way that we've given people a little insight into what is behind tea. When we go back to its source, the debates, the discussions, the disconnect that is happening between tea gardens and tea owners, workers' rights activists. I think you did an amazing job today to give people that greater insight. So thank you so much. We could keep going, but I'm going to have to wrap it up. Malika.
Well, I'll end here with this tweet from Rokia. She says, as consumers, though I'll add as citizens, as Anuradha said a little bit earlier, people should think of themselves as consumers or citizens. We must educate ourselves and hold companies accountable. No more excuses. Thank you for bringing unknown stories to light. So our thanks to Upendra for bringing this story to our attention.
Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you debating this issue on the stream today. Take care.